At his son's wedding they gave me a seat in the back. Called me, Dad's mistake. I waited until dessert. Then I handed the groom a simple envelope. Nothing flashy but heavy with meaning. It held more than anyone guessed. I remember the exact moment I realized I wasn't just a wife, but a mother. David had fallen at the playground, his tiny 2-year-old legs still unsteady on the wood chips. Blood trickled from his knee and his wail pierced the afternoon air. I rushed to him, scooping him up without hesitation. His tears soaked my blouse as I whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you." His little arms wrapped around my neck, trusting and innocent. That trust was everything. Sean watched from the bench, phone in hand. Later he thanked me for handling it. As if his son's pain was an errand, a task to be delegated. Looking back, perhaps I should have seen the sign. I'd met Sean at a mutual friend's dinner party 6 months after Charlotte died. He seemed hollowed out by grief, a man struggling to balance work and a toddler. I fell for his quiet determination, his gentle way with David. We married quickly, too quickly perhaps. But the sight of David's wide eyes watching me every morning as I made his breakfast cereal made every doubt vanish. Those early days were a whirlwind of learning. I'd never changed a diaper before, never soothed nightmares or checked for monsters under the bed. I stayed up nights reading parenting books while Sean slept, determined to get it right. When David caught pneumonia that first winter, I took 3 weeks off work, sleeping in a chair beside his hospital bed. Sean visited during lunch breaks, bringing coffee and updating me on work projects. "You're a natural," the nurses would say, assuming I was David's biological mother. I never corrected them. In my heart, the distinction didn't exist. When David turned 4, I used my inheritance from my grandmother to enroll him in the Montessori preschool across town. It cost 3 times what the local daycare charged, but the programs were exceptional. When Sean saw the tuition statement, he raised his eyebrows but said nothing. That became our pattern. I would pay, he would nod. "You don't mind covering this?" he asked once when the pediatric dentist recommended early orthodontic work that our insurance wouldn't fully cover. "Of course not," I replied. "He's our son." Sean looked away. "That's very generous of you." I didn't see it as generosity. When you love someone, you don't itemize receipts. You give what you can because their happiness completes your own. The college fund I started, the summer camps, the swim lessons, the private tutor when David struggled with reading. These weren't financial transactions but expressions of love. David's 5th birthday was when I first noticed the shift. Sean took him shopping for presents without inviting me along. When they returned, David clutched a photo album. "Daddy showed me pictures of my real mommy," he announced, eyes bright. "She was beautiful." My heart twisted but I smiled. She absolutely was, sweetheart. That night I asked Sean why he hadn't included me. "He needs to know about Charlotte," he said simply. "I don't want him forgetting where he came from." "I would never want him to forget," I replied. "But I'm here too." Sean's eyes cooled. In a different way. The word real became a splinter in our home, small but perpetually painful. "My real mom liked strawberry ice cream too," David would say. Or, "Did my real mom know how to French braid like you do?" Each time I'd swallow the hurt and respond with stories about Charlotte that Sean had shared with me. I refused to make David feel guilty for his curiosity. When David was 7, he made a Mother's Day card at school. I found it tucked deep in the trash. "Happy Mother's Day," crossed out and replaced with, "To Eleanor" in Sean's handwriting. I cried in the laundry room that evening, the washing machine's hum masking my sobs. Yet there were beautiful moments too. The night David crawled into my bed during a thunderstorm, seeking comfort from me instead of his father. The proud smile he flashed when I cheered louder than anyone at his first soccer goal. The time he fell asleep against my shoulder during a long car ride, completely trusting. "Why doesn't David call you Mom?" my sister asked during a rare visit. We were watching him play in the yard, Sean at work. "It needs to be his choice," I replied. "I don't want to pressure him." "But you are his mom," she insisted. "In every way that counts." Perhaps that was my mistake, believing that love speaks for itself. That actions translate clearly without words to frame them. That Sean would honor my role even if he didn't acknowledge it publicly. By David's 10th birthday, Sean had grown distant not just from me but from home itself. Business trips lengthened. Weekend golf games multiplied. I became both parents by default, attending every parent-teacher conference alone, solving every childhood crisis solo. What I wouldn't see, was what happened during those rare father-son outings. How Sean would casually mention that I wasn't blood family. How he would show pictures of Charlotte saying, "Your mother would be so proud," with pointed emphasis. How he would correct David if he slipped and called me anything close to mom. "Eleanor is very kind to help out with you," he would say, as if I were an au pair rather than the woman who held our family together. The damage accumulated gradually like rainwater eroding stone. David grew more formal around me, the easy affection of early childhood hardening into polite distance. By 12, he knocked before entering rooms I occupied. By 13, he stopped seeking my advice on friends, school, his changing body. I convinced myself it was normal adolescence, that all teenagers pull away before returning. I told myself that the foundation we'd built would eventually reassert itself. I believed that truth, my daily, hourly love, would ultimately speak louder than whatever narrative Sean was constructing. I was wrong. The seeds Sean planted grew roots, twisted and binding. What I didn't understand then was that love isn't always enough. Sometimes it needs advocates, defenders, witnesses. Sometimes silence isn't graceful acceptance but slow surrender. And so the years passed with me pouring love into a vessel that leaked, never knowing that someone else was drilling the holes. The shift happened so gradually I almost couldn't pinpoint when the child who once sought my comfort became the teenager who barely met my eyes across the dinner table. David turned 14 on a crisp autumn day. I'd spent weeks planning a surprise party, coordinating with his friends' parents, decorating the basement with gaming themes he loved. When the moment came and everyone shouted, "Surprise!" his smile was genuine, until he saw me standing there holding his favorite chocolate cake with 14 carefully placed candles. "Thanks," he said flatly before turning to high-five his friends. No hug. Not even the quick, embarrassed one I'd grown accustomed to receiving in public. Later that evening, after his friends had gone home, I handed him a small box containing the vintage watch I'd tracked down, identical to one his grandfather had owned, according to Sean's stories. "This is nice," David said, barely glancing at it before setting it aside. He saved his real enthusiasm for Sean's gift. A gaming system Sean had contributed nothing toward researching but had allowed me to purchase and wrap with his name alongside mine. "Dad, this is exactly what I wanted," he exclaimed, giving Sean the warm embrace I'd been denied. I retreated to the kitchen, busying myself with cleaning up wrapping paper, pretending the slight hadn't cut deep. That year marked the beginning of many silent birthdays. My cards received courteous acknowledgments. My gifts earned perfunctory thanks. The distance expanded into everyday life. Conversations dwindled to logistics. Dinner times, school schedules, weekend plans. One evening when David was 15, I noticed him struggling with geometry homework. Math had always been our thing. Long nights at the kitchen table working through problems together since elementary school. "Need any help?" I offered. He stiffened. "No thanks. Dad's going to help me later." Sean, who hadn't balanced his own checkbook in years, glanced up from his phone. "That's right, buddy. We'll tackle it together." They never did. I found the assignment crumpled in David's trash the next day, half finished with a failing grade scrawled across the top. When report cards came, I tried to discuss the geometry grade with David. "You used to love math," I said gently. "What changed?" Before David could respond, Sean interjected from across the room. "Leave him be, Eleanor. He's not yours to fix." The words hung in the air like smoke. David looked between us, confusion settling into something harder when Sean added, "You try too hard sometimes. He's my son." After that, Sean's comments became more frequent, more pointed. When I suggested David needed a curfew, "He doesn't need your rules." When I scheduled a dentist appointment, "I'll handle my son's healthcare decisions." When I asked about college applications, "This is between David and me." Each statement carved away at my place in our family until I found myself hesitating before entering rooms they occupied together, like an intruder in my own home. I started eating dinner later after they'd finished. I stopped asking about school events. I learned to exist on the periphery of their shared life. The college acceptance letter arrived during David's senior year. Harvard, his dream school. I'd spent countless nights reviewing essays without him knowing, sending subtle suggestions through Sean. The kitchen erupted in celebration when the thick envelope appeared. "We did it, Dad," David shouted, embracing Sean. Friends and extended family gathered that weekend for an impromptu celebration. I prepared all David's favorite foods, decorated with crimson and white. During toasts, David stood, glass raised. "I want to thank my father," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You've been my rock, my guide. Everything I am, I owe to you." Sean basked in the praise, accepting congratulations as if he'd single-handedly raised a Harvard man. No one seemed to notice that I'd slipped away to the kitchen, hands trembling as I sliced more cake. No one knew I'd already signed papers selling my mother's lakefront property, land that had been in our family for generations, to ensure David could attend without financial burden. 3 months later, I drove alone to a real estate closing, handing over deeds to land that had cradled my childhood summers. The agent asked why I was selling. "My son's education," I replied simply. It was the first time I'd said those words aloud in years. My son. That fall, I helped David pack for college while Sean was at work. As I folded sweaters and organized toiletries, David took a business call in his bedroom. His door was ajar and his voice carried down the hallway. "No, just my dad dropping me off," he was saying to someone. "Bye, stepmom? No, she's not really in the picture. Just lives with us." I froze, a shirt half folded in my hands. Not in the picture. After 16 years of bedtime stories, doctor's visits, homework help and unwavering support, I'd been reduced to a household fixture, like a lamp or side table. The bathroom became my sanctuary that afternoon. I locked the door, turned on the shower to mask any sound and sank to the floor. The tears came silently. I'd long since learned to cry without making noise. The shame of my pain felt almost worse than the pain itself. Why did it still hurt? Why couldn't I accept what was clearly reality? Yet beneath the hurt smoldered something fiercer. A mother's love, stubborn and unyielding. The next day I called Harvard's financial aid office privately, arranging payment schedules. I set up automatic transfers for David's rent, meal plan and expenses. I researched textbook costs, winter clothing needs for Massachusetts weather, health insurance details. When Sean drove David to college, I stayed behind, uninvited to the milestone moment. But the following week I mailed a care package with homemade cookies, vitamins, a subway map and $500 in cash. The note simply read, "Proud of you, Eleanor." No acknowledgement came. Still, every month I sent money. Every holiday, care packages. Throughout that freshman year, I monitored his bank account that I'd set up years earlier, ensuring it never dipped too low. When flu season hit Cambridge, I arranged for soup delivery to his dorm room. When winter break approached, I quietly paid for his flight home. Sean took full credit for David's success at parent weekends in phone calls and social media posts. I remained invisible, a ghost mother present only in the invisible safety net I maintained. "He'll understand someday," my sister insisted during one of our rare calls. "Kids figure it out eventually." I clung to that hope like a life raft. Someday the fog of Sean's manipulation would clear. Someday the years of steady love would count for something. Someday the truth would matter more than the narrative. That hope sustained me through 4 years of college, through the pain of exclusion, through the quiet indignity of erasure. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. One day at a time, one care package at a time, one silent act of love at a time. The day the wedding announcement came, I was tending to my small garden. Spring blossoms had just begun to appear, tiny bursts of color against the dark soil. The mailman waved from his truck as I knelt among the daffodils. Inside the pile of bills and advertisements lay a cream-colored envelope with elegant script. My hands trembled slightly as I read the announcement. David, now 26 and working at a prestigious law firm, was marrying Kelly Robinson. I'd never met her, though I'd seen photos on social media. A bright-eyed woman with a warm smile. They looked happy together. Despite everything, joy swelled in my chest. My boy, always my boy in my heart, was building a life. For a moment I allowed myself to daydream. Perhaps this would be our chance to reconnect. Weddings were new beginnings, not just for couples but sometimes for families too. I imagined helping Kelly pick flowers or address invitations, the comfortable companionship of women planning a celebration. I pictured myself beside David, watching him try on tuxedos, offering motherly advice he might finally be ready to hear. The formal invitation arrived 3 weeks later. I tore open the envelope eagerly, my heart light with possibility. The card was beautiful, letterpress printing on heavy stock, a watercolor border of blue hydrangeas. I ran my fingers over the raised text, savoring the moment before reading the names. Mr. and Mrs. Robinson request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter, Kelly Ann, to David Michael Porter, son of Mr. Sean Porter and Ms. Eleanor Wilkins. Not Mrs. Porter. Not David's mother. Just Eleanor Wilkins, as if I were a distant relation or family friend. My name sat alone, disconnected from the family unit. No handwritten note accompanied the formal text. No, can't wait to see you, or, hope you can make it. Just printed words, the same ones sent to distant cousins and work colleagues. I set the invitation on the kitchen counter and stared out the window. 24 years of my life dedicated to that boy, and I'd been reduced to an afterthought, a name to be accommodated rather than celebrated. The phone rang that evening, Sean, his voice overly casual. Got the invitation? He asked. Yes, it's lovely, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Good. Listen, David and I are meeting with the venue coordinator tomorrow. They need a deposit check. Of course. The financial expectation remained unchanged, even as my role diminished. How much? I asked, already reaching for my checkbook. The amount he named made me wince. Nearly a third of what remained from my aunt's inheritance. But I wrote the check without comment and left it in Sean's home office. 2 days later, a text from Sean. Caterer needs deposit too. Sending details. No invitation to join the tasting. No request for input on the menu. Just the expectation of payment. In the months that followed, I became a silent investor in a production where I had no creative input. Florist bills appeared on my desk with post-it notes in Sean's handwriting. David's wedding. Photographer deposits, band bookings, transportation arrangements. All presented as fait accompli, with only the financial obligation left for me to fulfill. I drained my savings account. I liquidated stocks my father had given me decades ago. I never complained, never questioned. Each check I wrote felt like a final act of motherhood. One last gift to the child who didn't see me. Kelly called once, her voice hesitant. Eleanor? It's Kelly. David's fiancée. Hello, dear, I said warmly, heart leaping at this small connection. How are the wedding plans coming? Great, she said. David's dad has been so helpful. I just wanted to check if you're coming to the rehearsal dinner? Sean mentioned you might not be able to make it. My breath caught. This was the first I'd heard of being excluded from the rehearsal. I hadn't heard about any scheduling conflict, I managed. Oh. Well, it's at the country club on Friday at 7. Sean said something about you having a prior commitment. The lie stung sharper than the exclusion itself. I had no prior commitment. How could I? This wedding had become my sole focus. I'll be there, I said firmly. Silence on the line, then. Great. I'll tell Sean to add you to the count. Add me to the count. As if I were an unexpected +1 rather than the woman who had raised the groom. The rehearsal dinner proved to be just the preview of what waited at the wedding. I sat at a table with distant relatives who asked repeatedly how I knew the family. Sean gave a heartfelt speech about watching his son grow into a man, carefully constructing a narrative that excluded me entirely. David thanked his father profusely, his new in-laws warmly, and offered me a cursory nod from across the room. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a sage green suit I'd purchased months earlier, when hope still colored my expectations. I drove myself to the vineyard where the ceremony would take place, arriving early to help if needed. The wedding planner, another expense I'd covered, looked confused when I offered assistance. Oh, we have everything handled, she said. The mother of the groom is helping Kelly get ready and Sean is with David. The mother of the groom. Kelly's mother had assumed the role that should have been mine. I wandered the grounds alone until guests began arriving. The ceremony space was beautiful. White chairs on a lawn overlooking rolling vineyards, an arch of blue and white flowers where the couple would exchange vows. I found my program on a seat in the back row, far from where family would sit. As I settled into my assigned place, I overheard 2 women behind me. Which one is she? One whispered. Back row, green suit. Dad's first mistake, the other replied with a chuckle. The real mom died years ago. Dad's first mistake. The words carved into me like a physical blow. Is that how I'd been described to others? As Sean's error in judgment, A regrettable detour in the family story? I sat frozen as the ceremony began, as David and Sean walked down the aisle together, as vows were exchanged and rings presented. I smiled mechanically in all the right places, applauded when others did, stood when directed. Inside, something was hardening, not my heart, which remained full of love for David, but my resolve. At the reception, my isolation became physically manifest. The seating chart placed me at table 19 in the farthest corner of the tent, with colleagues from David's firm who looked surprised when I introduced myself as his stepmother. From my peripheral position, I watched the family table laugh and toast, a tight circle of belonging from which I'd been deliberately excluded. I considered leaving. The humiliation burned like acid, eating away at my composed exterior. What was the point of enduring more of this calculated erasure? But as the servers began clearing dinner plates, preparing for the cake cutting and dessert, a strange calm settled over me. I reached into my handbag and felt the edge of the envelope I'd placed there that morning. Simple white stationery, unsealed, containing papers I'd compiled over months. Stay until dessert, I told myself. Just stay until dessert. The truth had waited 24 years. It could wait another hour. The wedding cake gleamed under the reception lights. 5 tiers of white fondant accented with sugar flowers that matched Kelly's bouquet. David and Kelly stood behind it, champagne glasses in hand, radiant with joy as the photographer directed them through the ritual. The silver cake knife caught the light as they made the first ceremonial cut together. Their hands overlapped in a picture-perfect moment. Applause rippled through the tent. I joined in mechanically, my hands moving without conscious direction. My mind had detached from the spectacle, floating somewhere above the celebration, watching myself watch them. The DJ's voice boomed across the space. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the father-son dance. Sean stepped forward, straightening his tie with practiced confidence. David's face lit up as they met in the center of the dance floor. The music swelled, some classic rock ballad that Sean had always loved. They moved awkwardly but earnestly across the polished floor, Sean's hand clapping his son's shoulder in that masculine display of affection that had always existed between them. Ladies and gentlemen, David called out as the song ended, his voice thick with emotion, a toast to my father, my greatest role model and best friend. Glasses raised throughout the room. Sean basked in the adoration, his arms slung casually around David's shoulders. Neither of them glanced toward table 19. The moment crystallized 24 years of invisibility. I could have been any stranger, any distant acquaintance witnessing this celebration. No one would have known I'd been the one to teach David to tie his shoelaces, to help him through his first heartbreak, to drive him to SAT prep classes every Saturday for 6 months. As the servers circulated with cake slices, I knew my moment had arrived. My fingers found the envelope in my purse. A simple white rectangle containing 2 decades of bank statements, canceled checks and transfer receipts. I'd compiled them methodically over 3 months, retrieving records from safety deposit boxes and old filing cabinets. The evidence of a mother's devotion, documented in cold financial terms. I stood, smoothing my skirt with suddenly steady hands. A strange calm had settled over me, the tranquility that comes with absolute certainty. I was done being erased. Done with the polite fiction that had defined our family. Done pretending that truth didn't matter. The path to the head table felt endless. Guests turned to watch my approach, conversations faltering as I passed. I felt rather than saw Sean's attention shift, his smile freezing as he registered my movement. David was laughing at something Kelly's father had said when I reached him. His eyes widened slightly when he noticed me standing there, surprise not warmth. Eleanor, he said, using my first name as he always did. Is everything okay? I didn't speak. Words had failed me for 24 years. They wouldn't serve me now. Instead, I simply extended the envelope, holding it between us like an offering. David hesitated before taking it, confusion evident in the furrow of his brow. What's this? I merely shook my head and stepped back. I'd delivered my message. The rest wasn't up to me. Sean moved forward, irritation flashing across his features. Eleanor, this isn't the time for... I turned and walked away before he could finish, my back straight, my steps measured. Behind me I heard Kelly ask, "What is it?" and David's murmured, "I don't know." I returned to my table but remained standing, watching from a distance as David opened the envelope. He pulled out the first sheet of paper. A bank statement from Harvard's bursar office, showing tuition payment from my personal account. Then another, the canceled check for his first apartment's security deposit. And another, the wire transfer for this very wedding venue. His expression changed gradually as he flipped through the pages. The confident smile faded. Confusion gave way to disbelief, then to something darker. A dawning comprehension that made his hands tremble visibly even from where I stood. Kelly leaned over his shoulder, her white dress brushing against his sleeve as she read alongside him. Her hand went to her mouth, eyes widening. Sean stepped closer, attempting to see the documents, but David angled his body away, an instinctive movement that spoke volumes. The reception continued around them, music playing, guests dancing, servers circulating with champagne refills. But at the head table, time seemed suspended in a bubble of revelation. David looked up, scanning the room. His eyes passed over me once, then returned, locking with mine across the distance. For the first time in years, he truly saw me, not as his father's wife, not as a peripheral figure, but as a person with agency and history and unacknowledged sacrifice. Kelly touched his arm, leaning close to whisper something in his ear. He nodded slowly, still holding my gaze. Then Kelly straightened, her expression resolute as she surveyed the crowded tent. Her voice carried clearly through the ambient noise when she spoke to him. "Go get your mother." The word hung in the air like a spell. Mother. Not Eleanor. Not stepmom. Mother. David stood, the papers clutched in his hand. Sean reached for his arm, saying something urgent that I couldn't hear, but David shook him off with uncharacteristic firmness. Guests noticed the tension, conversations faltering as attention shifted toward the head table. The DJ, oblivious to the unfolding drama, continued playing upbeat dance music that now seemed jarringly inappropriate. I remained still as David made his way toward me, weaving between tables with purpose. His face had lost its celebratory glow, replaced by an intensity one hadn't seen since he was a determined child trying to master bicycle riding or complex math problems. 10 feet away. Then he stood before me, the documents still gripped tightly in his left hand. The wedding ring on his right hand caught the light, the ring I'd helped pay for without acknowledgement. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the music. "All of it." I nodded once. "Every penny." "The college tuition? My apartment? This wedding?" "Yes. Dad said he paid for everything. He told me." His voice trailed off, unwilling or unable to complete the thought. "I know what he told you," I replied simply. David looked down at the papers again, then back at me. Something shifted in his eyes. A recalibration of 24 years of carefully constructed narrative. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" he asked. The question contained multitudes. Why hadn't I corrected Sean's lies? Why hadn't I demanded recognition? Why had I allowed myself to be erased from our family story? "Would you have believed me?" I answered softly. The truth of that question landed like a physical blow. He wouldn't have. Sean's version of our family had been the only one David had ever fully accepted. Till now. The music faded as the DJ announced the bouquet toss would be next. Neither of us moved. The moment stretched between us, heavy with unspoken questions and 2 decades of misdirection. Then David did something he hadn't done since he was 12 years old. He reached for my hand. David's hand in mine felt foreign yet achingly familiar, like a melody once known by heart and long forgotten. His fingers were larger now, a man's hand instead of the boy's hand I remembered, but the gentle pressure was the same. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. "Somewhere quieter." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Around us, the reception swirled on. The photographer directing poses, the DJ announcing the bouquet toss, guests laughing over champagne. None of it seemed real anymore. David led me through the side exit of the tent, past curious onlookers and away from the golden light of the celebration. The spring evening air felt cool against my flushed skin. We walked in silence until we reached a stone bench overlooking the vineyard's sloping hills, far enough from the music that we could hear the chirp of evening crickets. I sat down, smoothing my dress beneath me. David remained standing, the envelope still clutched in his hand, shifting his weight from one foot to another like he used to do before piano recitals as a child. "I need to understand," he finally said. "All these years, everything was you?" I looked out at the darkening vineyard, gathering my thoughts. Not everything. But the financial support, yes. The college tuition, your first apartment, the summer internship housing, this wedding. Why would he lie? David interrupted, his voice cracking slightly. Why would Dad tell me he was the one supporting me? The question hung between us, sharp-edged and dangerous. For 24 years I'd protected Sean's ego, preserved his image in David's eyes. The truth felt like betrayal even now. Your father, I began, then stopped myself. Sean loves you, David. In his way. That doesn't answer my question. I sighed. Some men need to be heroes to their children. Sean couldn't be the financial provider he wanted to be. Maybe it was easier for him to take credit than admit he couldn't give you what you needed. David ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, musing it in frustration. But to erase you completely? To act like you weren't even part of my life. He paced in front of the bench, energy radiating from him in waves. I remember him saying you were just someone who lived with us, that you weren't really family. I believed him. The admission stung, but I had long suspected as much. Children trust their parents, I said simply. Why wouldn't you believe him? Because you were there. His voice rose, emotion breaking through. You were there every day, driving me to school, helping with homework, making dinner. You were there when I had chickenpox and couldn't sleep. You were there at every band concert, every baseball game. He stopped suddenly, the realization dawning across his features. You were there and I didn't see you. His eyes met mine, shining with unshed tears. Then he did something that stole my breath. He knelt in front of me on the garden path, taking both my hands in his. Mom, he said, the word emerging like a prayer, fragile and reverent. I didn't know. 24 years of waiting for that word. 24 years of answering to Eleanor or hey, or nothing at all. The dam inside me broke, tears spilling down my cheeks unchecked. I made no effort to hide them or wipe them away. It's okay, I whispered, but David shook his head vehemently. It's not okay. None of this is okay. His own tears fell now, tracking down his face and dampening his color. I'm so sorry. For everything I never said. For everything I never thanked you for. For every time I chose not to see what was right in front of me. I leaned forward and wrapped my arms around him, pulling him against my shoulder as I had when he was small. He didn't resist, his body shaking with quiet sobs that matched my own. I'm sorry, he repeated against my shoulder. I'm so sorry. Time lost meaning as we sat there, grief and reconciliation flowing between us like a current. When he finally pulled back, his face was transformed, younger somehow, unburdened of something heavy. Every baseball game, he said softly. Every science fair. Every time I was sick. You were always there, and he convinced me that didn't matter. David. No, he interrupted, his voice firmer now. I need to say this. I believed him when he said you weren't really my mother. I let him rewrite my own memories. I accepted his version over what I actually lived. A twig snapped nearby, and we both turned to see Kelly standing a few yards away, her white dress ghostly in the gathering dusk. She approached hesitantly. I didn't want to interrupt, she said, but I was worried. David stood, reaching for her hand. Kelly, I need to tell you something about my family. About who really raised me. She glanced between us, her expression gentle. I think I'm starting to understand. To my surprise, she knelt beside me on the bench and wrapped her arms around me in a firm hug. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I had no idea. Sean always talked as if you were just his wife, not David's mother. Her validation soothed something raw inside me. To be seen. To be acknowledged. The simplicity of that recognition felt like water after years of drought. I want you at our table, Kelly said, pulling back to look me in the eyes. Not in the back corner. You should be beside us where family belongs. David nodded vigorously. Yes. Right now. We'll have them rearrange. But why? I interrupted, the question burning inside me since I'd first opened that envelope of wedding receipts. Why would your father work so hard to erase me? What did I do to deserve that? David's expression darkened. He exchanged a glance with Kelly, who squeezed his hand in silent support. I think I know, he said slowly. And it has nothing to do with anything you did wrong. What then? David sat beside me, choosing his words carefully. All these years, Dad talked about how much he sacrificed for me after Charlotte died. How he gave up everything to raise me alone. He wasn't alone, I said. I was there from the time you were 2. Exactly. But his whole identity became wrapped up in being the heroic single father. If he acknowledged your role, he'd have to share that identity. He'd have to share me. David's voice caught. And maybe face the truth that you were a better parent than he ever was. The realization settled over me with perfect, painful clarity. I wasn't erased because I failed as a mother. I was erased because I succeeded, and that success threatened Sean's carefully constructed narrative. You were never his partner, David continued, insight flashing in his eyes. You were his convenience. Someone to handle the daily work of parenting while he claimed the credit. I winced at hearing my own thoughts spoken aloud. He's still your father, David. Yes, he acknowledged, but not the father I thought he was. Not the hero I've spent my life trying to impress. His shoulders slumped slightly. Do you know how many decisions I've made just to make him proud? Law school. Firm. Even parts of this wedding. Kelly placed a hand on his arm. People are starting to notice we're all missing. David straightened, resolve replacing hurt on his features. Let them notice. It's time for the truth to come out. He stood, offering me his hand. Will you come back in with us? As my mother, not as a guest. The invitation was everything I'd longed for, yet I hesitated. Sean won't take this well. I don't care, David said firmly. This is my wedding day and I want my mother beside me. Mother. The word still sent a tremor through me. As we walked back toward the reception, Kelly on one side and David on the other, I felt a weight lifting, years of invisibility falling away with each step. Behind us, the vineyard stretched dark and vast. Ahead, the warm light of truth and recognition. For the first time in decades, I walked not as a shadow but as myself. Eleanor Wilkins, David's mother. The reception tent glowed golden against the darkening sky as we approached, arms linked like a united front. Conversations faltered and heads turned as we entered. The music continued playing, Frank Sinatra's The Way You Look Tonight. But attention had shifted from the dance floor to our unlikely trio. Sean spotted us first. His champagne glass paused halfway to his lips, eyes narrowing as he registered the changed dynamic between us. He set his glass down with deliberate calm and started toward us, his practiced smile not quite reaching his eyes. There you are, he said, addressing David while pointedly ignoring me. Everyone's been wondering where you disappeared to. The photographer wants some more family shots. Perfect timing, David interrupted, his voice clear and firm. We need photos with my mother. The word hung in the air between them. Sean's smile froze, then faltered. David, he began, lowering his voice, this really isn't the time for the truth. David finished. I disagree. This is exactly the time. He placed his hand over mine where it rested on his arm. I've just learned who really paid for my education. My apartment. This wedding. His voice remained even, but carried an undercurrent of steel I'd never heard before. Why would you lie to me about that? Sean's face flushed. We can discuss this later. In private. No, David said simply. I'm done with private half-truths. Eleanor. He caught himself, squeezing my hand. My mother deserves better. She deserves recognition for everything she's done. Kelly stepped forward, her expression composed despite the tension. I've asked the staff to move Eleanor's place setting to our table. Her voice held no room for negotiation. Where she belongs. Sean's jaw tightened. For a moment, I glimpsed the man beneath the charm, the one who had systematically erased me from his son's life. He glanced around at the nearby guests, pretending not to eavesdrop, then back at David. Son, you're emotional. We can sort this out tomorrow. I'm not emotional, Dad. I'm seeing clearly for the first time. David straightened his shoulders. The photographer can wait. I have something to say first. Before Sean could object, David guided me toward the center of the tent. Kelly nodded to the DJ, who lowered the music. Conversation died away as David raised his glass, the crystal catching light as he sought the attention of the room. If I could have everyone's attention, please, he called. The remaining chatter faded to silence. All eyes turned toward us. David tall and resolute in his tuxedo, me still in my sage green suit from the back row, Kelly radiant in white. David took a deep breath. Many of you have known me my whole life. You've watched me grow up. Graduate. Start my career. Today marry the love of my life. His voice was steady, carrying to the farthest tables. But I realize now that you've only known half my story. The half my father wanted you to see. A ripple moved through the crowd. Sean remained frozen at the edge of the gathering, face unreadable. I'd like to propose a toast, David continued, to the woman who gave me more than I ever knew, and never asked for anything in return. He turned to me, eyes shining with emotion. My mother, Eleanor Wilkins, who raised me, supported me, and loved me unconditionally, even when I failed to recognize that love. Murmurs spread across the room. Guests exchanged glances, recalibrating years of assumptions. I stood straight, chin lifted, neither denying nor affirming the whispers. The truth spoke for itself now. To my mother, David concluded, raising his glass higher. To Eleanor, Kelly echoed, raising her own glass. Glasses lifted throughout the tent, the gesture spreading like ripples on water. To Eleanor, voices repeated, some confused, some curious, all watching this unexpected drama unfold. I didn't search for Sean's reaction. It no longer mattered. Instead, I looked at David, really looked at him, and saw the little boy who once climbed into my lap for bedtime stories, now grown into a man brave enough to face uncomfortable truths. My smile came not from vindication but from peace, the quiet contentment of finally being seen after decades of invisibility. I hadn't been Dad's first mistake. I had been a mother. A real one. The toast complete, David leaned down to whisper, "I'm sorry it took me this long." "You found your way," I replied simply. The reception continued, transforming around us. Staff brought a chair to the head table, placing it between David and Kelly's parents. The photographer captured new combinations of family portraits, David with both his father and me, though Sean maintained rigid distance throughout. Guests approached tentatively at first, then with growing warmth, introducing themselves or reintroducing themselves, seeing me with new eyes. David always had the best Halloween costumes, one college friend told me. He said his moth. He caught himself. He said you stayed up all night making them. The dinosaur was my favorite, I replied with a smile. Green felt scales for days. You made that, he laughed. Legendary. We all wanted one. Such moments accumulated throughout the evening. Small recognitions, connections restored, history rewritten with truth rather than convenience. Not all reactions were positive. Sean's sister avoided me entirely. His college roommate muttered something about stirring up drama as he passed. But for each cold shoulder, there came a warm handshake, a genuine question, an acknowledgement of my place in David's life. The wedding ended near midnight. As guests departed with sparklers and well wishes, David embraced me one last time before leaving for the honeymoon suite. We'll talk more when Kelly and I get back from Bali, he promised. There's so much I want to know. So many years to catch up on. I'll be here, I assured him. I've always been here. Life after that night wasn't perfect. True healing never follows a smooth path. The first few family gatherings were awkward, Sean and I maintaining careful distance, sharing a son but little else. David sometimes overcompensated, including me in every decision, every celebration as if making up for lost time. But gradually a new normal emerged. David called regularly, not out of obligation but genuine desire to connect. He and Kelly visited for Sunday dinners, then later brought their daughter, my granddaughter, Emma Charlotte, named for both her grandmothers. When Emma was baptized, David asked me to stand as her godmother. You taught me what unconditional love looks like, he explained. That's what I want for her. The following May brought my first official Mother's Day. The doorbell rang early, revealing a delivery man struggling with an enormous bouquet of wildflowers. Not formal roses or lilies, but meadow blooms in riotous colors, the kind I'd always preferred. The card read simply, You raised me twice, once with love, once with truth. I needed both. Love your son. I placed the flowers in the center of my dining table and sat looking at them for a long while, their beauty unruly and perfect. Like motherhood itself. Like truth. Sean and I eventually reached a détente of sorts. He never apologized explicitly, but acknowledgement came in subtle forms. Introducing me as David's mother at Emma's first birthday party, consulting me about holiday gifts, yielding space without complaint. The past couldn't be undone. The years of erasure couldn't be reclaimed. but they could be recognized, honored in their pain and their lesson. I never wanted revenge, just truth. And that night, in front of everyone, the truth had come home to roost, quiet, powerful, and finally, irrevocably mine. When people ask me now if I regret those silent years, I think of David's face as he knelt before me on that garden path. I think of Emma's tiny fingers clutching mine. I think of the Mother's Day cards that now arrive without fail. No, I always answer. Truth finds its moment. Love finds its way home. And sometimes that journey begins with a simple envelope handed over at just the right time. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. My favorite moment was when David finally called Eleanor Mom. What was yours? Share in the comments. Subscribe for more stories that'll make you feel something. My husband disappeared one day, leaving me with a $20,000 debt and no way to reach him. As I sat crying, my 10-year-old daughter said, "Don't worry. I fixed it." 3 days later, he called me in a panic after realizing that it was a day like any other, or so I thought. The kind of day where nothing ever seems out of the ordinary until it all falls apart. I was sitting in the living room of our modest apartment, trying to calm my racing thoughts as I glanced at the overdue bills scattered across the coffee table. My heart sank each time I picked up one of those letters. Each one a reminder of a debt I couldn't even begin to pay. My husband Tom had always taken care of the finances, or so I thought. But when he vanished 3 days ago without a word, it wasn't just the debts I was left with. It was the confusion, the betrayal, and the overwhelming realization that I was utterly alone. Before we get into the heart of this story, I just want to express my gratitude for your support. If you're captivated by this tale of unexpected twists and strength, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and it ensures you never miss a moment of this thrilling journey. Now let's dive deep into what happens next. I had tried calling him dozens of times, sending message after message, but no response. His phone went straight to voicemail and every call to his friends or family yielded nothing. Tom wasn't the type of person to just disappear. He'd always been a good provider, a loving father, and a man who would never abandon his family. But the sudden silence, the complete disappearance, it didn't make sense. What was happening? The weight of it all was unbearable. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything other than the questions swirling in my mind. And then, just as I was sinking deeper into despair, a voice broke through the fog. My 10-year-old daughter Lily walked into the room and sat beside me. She didn't seem worried at all, as if everything was going to be okay despite the chaos we were now living in. Her innocent smile made my heart ache even more. "Don't worry, Mom," she said in a soft yet strangely confident voice. "I fixed it." I froze, unable to comprehend what she was saying. What did she mean, fixed it? How could she possibly have fixed anything? She was just a child, and there was no way she could have done anything about the mess Tom had left behind. But Lily didn't seem concerned. She simply looked at me with those big, trusting eyes as though everything would be all right. I couldn't help but wonder what she meant by that. What followed in the next few days would be the most unexpected twist of all. 3 days later, when the despair had almost completely overtaken me, the phone rang. My heart skipped a beat when I saw Tom's name on the screen. I hadn't heard from him since he left, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face whatever explanation he might have for his sudden disappearance. "Tom?" I asked, my voice shaky with both anger and confusion. There was a long pause before he spoke, and when he did, his words sent a chill down my spine. I made a huge mistake," he said, his voice cracking. "And I don't know how to fix it. I need you to listen carefully. This is bigger than I thought." I sat back, my mind racing. "What are you talking about? Where have you been? And what happened to all this debt? Why didn't you tell me about any of this?" Tom sighed, and I could hear the strain in his voice. "I thought I could handle it. I thought I could hide it from you. But I couldn't. I was gambling, I was trying to pay off some debts, and I made things worse. I thought I could escape, but now I realize the mess I left you in." I was stunned. Betrayed. I had always trusted Tom, and this revelation shattered everything I had believed about our life together. My thoughts were spinning and I could barely make sense of what he was saying. But there was one thing I couldn't ignore. The fact that he was calling me now in a panic after everything he'd put me through. "I'm sorry," he repeated, his voice filled with guilt. "But there's something you don't know. Lily, she's the one who's been handling everything." I felt a chill run through me. What was he talking about? How could Lily, my 10-year-old daughter, have been involved in any of this? I couldn't understand it. How was it possible? Lily? I asked, barely able to comprehend what he was saying. What do you mean? What has she done? Tom hesitated, then his voice dropped to a whisper. She knew. She knew about the debt, about everything. And she took matters into her own hands. I don't know how she did it, but she fixed the situation. She's the one who made sure things were taken care of. I don't know how she did it, but she's the reason I'm calling you now. I was silent for a moment, trying to process what Tom had just said. My mind was racing and I couldn't quite grasp the magnitude of the situation. My daughter, my sweet innocent little girl, had somehow figured out how to deal with the mess her father had created. How had she done it? And why hadn't she said anything to me? Before I could ask any more questions, Tom continued, his voice filled with panic. I don't know how she did it, but she's not just a little girl anymore. She's smarter than I ever gave her credit for. I didn't want to believe it, but now I realize, she's the one who's been keeping everything together. She's fixed things in ways I can't even begin to explain. And now, because of what she did, I'm in deep trouble. I couldn't make sense of it. My daughter, the one I had always thought of as innocent, had been secretly managing the very thing that had torn our family apart. I needed answers, but I wasn't sure I was ready to face the truth. Tom, I said, my voice trembling. What are you talking about? What has Lily done? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Tom spoke, his voice barely a whisper. She's the reason I'm in trouble. She's the reason I'm calling you now. And it's because of her that everything's about to change. I was shaken to my core. The reality of the situation was beginning to hit me, and the questions I had were growing by the minute. How had my daughter known? How had she fixed everything? And why was Tom now in a state of panic? What happened next would shake me even further, leading to revelations that would forever change the course of our lives. The story was just beginning, and I wasn't sure I was ready for the truth. I couldn't get the image of Tom's voice out of my head. That tone of panic, how could I have missed it all these years? I had always thought our marriage was solid. Sure, there were ups and downs like any relationship, but nothing that felt like a bomb waiting to go off. Yet here I was, sitting in the same room where we had once laughed together, holding our daughter's tiny hand while she calmly told me that everything would be fixed. How did she know? What did she mean? It didn't make sense. I felt like my whole world had been turned upside down, and nothing about this situation seemed right. Tom and I had been married for almost 12 years. We met when I was just 22, fresh out of college, full of ambition and hope for a future filled with love and success. Tom was the kind of man who could make everyone laugh. He had that charm, quick with a joke and always the life of the party. He made me feel safe. He made me feel like I was the center of his universe. I remember thinking that I was the luckiest woman alive when he asked me to marry him. We built a life together. A modest life, but one filled with love and laughter. And then of course came Lily. Lily was our miracle baby, born after years of trying. She was everything to us. The light of our lives, the one person who could always put a smile on our faces no matter how hard the day had been. Tom and I had been partners in every sense of the word, from managing our modest home to raising our daughter. I had stayed home with Lily while Tom worked long hours, convinced that he was securing our future. And for a while it felt like everything was going as planned. We were happy, at least I thought we were. But now I wondered, how much of our happiness had been a facade? How much had I missed in my trust in him? There were signs, I suppose, signs I should have noticed. Tom's late nights had become more frequent. He'd always come home exhausted, but these days it was different. He had become distant, withdrawn, as if something was gnawing at him from the inside. But I brushed it off. After all, we all go through tough times, right? I convinced myself that his stress was just from work or whatever else he was dealing with. How foolish I had been. When he disappeared without a word, it felt like a punch to the gut. I spent hours, no, days, trying to find out where he had gone, what had happened. The silence was deafening. And then, of course, the bills. The debt. The sinking feeling that perhaps maybe I hadn't known my husband as well as I thought. He had left me holding the bag with nothing to show for it but a mountain of unpaid bills and unanswered questions. But that phone call 3 days later was a revelation in itself. Hearing Tom on the other end of the line, his voice cracking with panic, was not what I expected. It wasn't the voice of the man I thought I knew. There was fear in his tone, desperation, and a sense of accountability that I had never heard from him before. But what shocked me the most was his admission. Lily, she's the one who's been handling everything. The weight of his words hit me harder than anything else. My daughter, my sweet Lily, who was only 10 years old, had somehow managed to fix the disaster her father had left behind? I didn't know whether to be furious or relieved. How could a child, a girl still so innocent in so many ways, have been involved in something like this? And why hadn't she told me? Why hadn't I known? I had to know more. I needed to understand how my daughter, the same one who still relied on me to tie her shoes, could be so involved in something that seemed so adult. The realization that Lily was somehow the key to fixing the mess her father had made sent a wave of confusion through me. How could I reconcile the image of my innocent child with the possibility that she had orchestrated something beyond my comprehension? I wasn't sure what to do with the information. My mind raced, filled with questions that didn't have immediate answers. How much did she know? What exactly had she done to fix things? And what did Tom mean by saying everything was about to change? Was he in danger? Was he scared because of something my daughter had done? The days that followed were filled with a strange mixture of tension and disbelief. I found myself watching Lily more closely than ever before, trying to read her face, to find any clue that might explain what had transpired in the days since Tom's disappearance. I wasn't sure whether I should confront her, or if I should wait for her to come to me with the truth. But what truth was she hiding? Was she hiding something at all? There were moments when I thought I saw something flicker behind her eyes. A kind of understanding, a knowing that wasn't supposed to be there. She was different. But was she just growing up? Or had she crossed some invisible line into a world that I couldn't even begin to understand? Then one evening as I was cleaning up the kitchen, I heard her voice again, soft but steady, as though she had been waiting for the right moment. "Mom," she said, "I knew something was wrong. And I knew I had to fix it." The words hit me like a wave. "Fix it?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Lily nodded, her eyes not meeting mine, as if she couldn't bear to look at me. "I knew you were scared and I knew you didn't know what to do. So I did it for you." My heart skipped a beat. "What did you do, Lily? How did you fix all of this?" She paused, gathering her thoughts as if choosing her words carefully. "I made some calls. I talked to people. I found a way to make things right." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My 10-year-old daughter. How could she possibly have been in contact with anyone to resolve a grown-up mess like this? My mind reeled with the possibilities, none of them good. What kind of world had I unwittingly allowed my daughter to step into? But before I could press her further, she said something that would leave me speechless. "Dad's in trouble, Mom. He's not coming back unless you help him. You're the only one who can." I felt my breath catch in my throat. What was she saying? How did she know these things? And why was she suddenly asking for my help? This was beyond anything I had ever imagined. My own daughter, carrying the weight of a secret far too big for her small shoulders. With those few words, Lily had set into motion a new chain of events, one that would lead to a truth I wasn't ready to face. How far had Tom gone? How deep had my daughter gotten involved? And most importantly, what price would we all have to pay for the things that were already set in motion? As the words fell from Lily's lips, my world seemed to crumble even further. She knew, she understood, and I was utterly lost. Tom had vanished, leaving me with the weight of his debts and no way of knowing how deep the hole really was. But now Lily, my sweet little girl, was telling me things that only added layers of confusion and dread to an already impossible situation. I felt the icy grip of panic rising in my chest. How had we gotten here? How had I missed so much? Tom's disappearance had been shocking, but now the truth was becoming more complex than I could have ever imagined. My heart ached as I tried to put the pieces together. My daughter wasn't just a bystander in this mess, she was part of it. And her words made it clear. It wasn't just about money or a few bad decisions. Something much darker was at play. The more I tried to process the situation, the more questions piled up. I needed to understand what had happened in the days since Tom left. I needed to know exactly how Lily was involved and, more importantly, how she had been so calm while I was drowning in anxiety and despair. There was something unsettling about the way she spoke, like she had already planned everything. But how? Why hadn't she come to me? I was her mother after all. Didn't she trust me enough to share whatever burden she was carrying? That evening I decided to confront her. Sitting across from her at the kitchen table, I found myself searching her face for any sign of hesitation or guilt, but there was nothing. She was too composed, too confident in a way that didn't match her age. It was as if she had carried this secret for far longer than I had been able to see. Lily, I began, trying to steady my voice. What exactly did you do? How did you fix this? What are you talking about when you say Dad's in trouble? What do you mean you're the only one who can help him? Her gaze shifted slightly as if she were considering how much to reveal. She wasn't afraid though. If anything, she seemed to be waiting for me to catch up with her. I didn't have a choice, she said quietly, almost to herself. I knew you couldn't handle everything. You were so upset. I didn't want to see you like that anymore. It wasn't the answer I was expecting. My heart sank even further. What did she mean I couldn't handle everything? I had always done my best to shield her from the hardships of adult life, yet here she was, telling me she had taken matters into her own hands. This was no longer just about Tom's betrayal. It was about my own failure to see what was right in front of me. Lily, I whispered, my voice breaking, you're just a child. How could you possibly know what to do? I had to learn, she replied, her voice surprisingly steady. I had to figure out how to stop everything from falling apart. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. What had she been doing behind my back? Who had she been talking to? My mind raced as the realization hit me. Tom's disappearance wasn't the only thing that had been orchestrated. Lily had been pulling strings in the background, and I had no idea what she had gotten herself into. I'm scared, I confessed, my voice trembling as I looked into her eyes. I don't know how we got here, Lily. I don't know what to do next. I can't even fix this. I don't even know where to begin. Lily's gaze softened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the little girl I had always known. She reached across the table and took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Don't worry, Mom. You're not alone. I've got it. Her words should have comforted me, but they didn't. They only made the situation feel more unreal. I had no idea how to process any of this. My daughter was carrying more weight on her shoulders than I could ever have imagined. It was one thing to be betrayed by my husband, but it was another entirely to know that my child had somehow taken on the responsibility of fixing his mistakes. And now she was telling me that it wasn't just about the money. It was about Tom's life, his safety, and the mess he had created for us all. I could feel my heart racing in my chest, but it wasn't just fear. It was a mixture of frustration, anger, and disbelief. How had I missed this? How had I not seen the signs that my daughter was struggling with something so heavy? I thought I was protecting her, but in reality I was the one who had failed her. The next morning I found myself pacing around the house, trying to make sense of everything. Lily had been quiet all evening, retreating into her room after our conversation. I wanted to believe she had everything under control, but something inside me told me that this wasn't over. There were still too many questions, too many loose ends. And then, just as I was about to call Tom again, hoping for answers, the phone rang. It wasn't Tom's number that appeared on the screen, but a strange, unfamiliar one. My stomach dropped as I stared at the number, unsure of what to do. Should I answer it? Was this another part of the mess Tom had created? I hesitated for only a moment before pressing the green button. Hello, I said, my voice shaky. A deep, unfamiliar voice responded. You don't know who I am, but I know who you are. And I know what's been happening. We need to talk. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Who is this? What did they know? And how were they connected to all of this? Who is this? I demanded, my voice trembling with both fear and curiosity. Let's just say I've been keeping an eye on things. And if you want to help Tom, if you want to save him, you're going to have to follow my instructions. Don't do anything on your own. You're not the only one in danger here. The line went dead before I could say another word. I stood there holding the phone, completely stunned. Was this the person Lily had been working with? Was this the reason Tom had been so scared? I had no answers, only more questions. But now I knew one thing for certain. Whatever was going on, it was far from over. And I had no idea where this twisted path would lead us next. The voice on the phone had rattled me. I was still standing in the same spot, holding the phone to my ear long after the call had ended, my mind reeling from the cryptic words. You're not the only one in danger here. What did that even mean? And who was this person really? The fact that they knew so much about Tom and my situation made my skin crawl. I had to understand what was going on, who was behind all of this, and how it was connected to the web of lies my husband had created. I had no choice but to take action. I could feel a sense of urgency creeping into my bones, driving me to do something, anything to take control of the situation. But what could I do? How could I possibly handle this on my own when everything felt like it was slipping through my fingers? And then there was Lily, my daughter, the one who had seemingly fixed everything. Or had she? Was she really the mastermind behind all of this? Or was she being manipulated by forces far beyond her understanding? I couldn't afford to sit idly by any longer. The phone call had been a turning point. It was a warning, but it was also a clue. Someone out there had power over the situation and I needed to know who they were. I needed answers and I needed them fast. I decided to start by looking into the number that had called me. With a trembling hand, I dialed it again, praying that I'd reach whoever it was that had spoken to me before. The line rang for what felt like an eternity before it was picked up and I held my breath. "Hello," I said, my voice a mixture of fear and determination. There was a brief silence on the other end before the deep voice answered. "You're getting smarter, I see. Good. It's about time you figured it out. Who are you?" I demanded, feeling my pulse quicken. "And what do you want from me? Why are you involved in all of this?" "I don't have time for explanations, but I'll give you one. Tom made a mistake and now so have you," the voice said. "Your next move will determine how this all plays out. You have to decide if you want to save him, or if you want to make sure he pays for what he's done." I felt the weight of the words sink into me like lead. Save him? After everything? Was he even worth saving? Tom had destroyed everything. He'd abandoned us, left me with nothing but a mess of his own making. But then there was Lily. Lily, who had been a part of this. Lily, who had made choices I couldn't even begin to understand. Could I really let him suffer knowing that my daughter might be the key to fixing it all? Or was there something even more dangerous at play? "Listen carefully," the voice continued. "You're going to need to make a deal. There are people who want Tom gone. And if you don't act fast, they'll make sure he never comes back. You're not in control here, but you can be. It's your choice." The phone clicked and the line went dead. My heart raced as I stood there, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about a failing marriage or a man running from his mistakes. This was bigger. I had no idea what I had stepped into, but I knew one thing for sure. I was in it now. And I wasn't about to let it all slip away without a fight. I turned back to Lily, who had been quietly sitting in the living room, watching me with those wide, innocent eyes. She knew more than she was letting on. I could see it in the way she was watching me now, as if she were waiting for me to ask the right questions. But I couldn't bring myself to ask her just yet. The fear of what I might uncover kept me silent, even as the storm of uncertainty swirled around us. Instead, I focused on the task at hand. Tom's disappearance, the debts, the people involved, and the phone call. It was all connected. I knew I had to act quickly or else I'd lose everything. But what was the right move? What could I do that would change the course of this twisted mess? Revenge. It had always been the last thing on my mind. But now it seemed like my only option. If I didn't take control, I was going to lose my husband and my daughter to forces beyond my understanding. I started piecing together what I knew. Tom had been hiding his debts, gambling, and making deals that had put us all at risk. And now, the people who had been after him were threatening to take everything from us. The thought of losing Lily, of having her dragged into a world of corruption and danger, pushed me forward. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not on my watch. The first thing I did was gather information. I knew I had to find out more about the people Tom had been involved with. Who they were, what they wanted, and how far they would go to get what they wanted. I wasn't going to let them control me. I had to be smarter than that. I spent hours searching through Tom's papers, his computer files, and his contacts, trying to uncover any clue that could give me leverage. It wasn't easy, but I was determined. I couldn't afford to fail now. As I worked, I found something that made my heart stop. There was a name that kept popping up in Tom's communications. A name I hadn't seen before. James Carson. Whoever he was important. And I was starting to get the feeling that he was the key to everything. I did a quick search on my phone and my stomach dropped when I saw the results. James Carson wasn't just a name in Tom's business dealings. He was a well-known figure in the underworld. Someone who had connections that stretched far beyond what I had imagined. He was dangerous, and if he was involved, things were worse than I thought. Suddenly, everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. Tom's mistake wasn't just a simple gambling issue. It was part of a larger scheme, one that involved people who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized that my family was in far deeper than I had ever imagined. The plan was starting to form in my mind. It wasn't about saving Tom anymore. It was about saving Lily and myself from a future I couldn't even begin to understand. I had to outsmart these people, use their own tactics against them. And it was going to take everything I had. The stakes were higher than ever, and the time to act was now. I wasn't going to wait for things to fall apart any longer. As I set my plan into motion, I couldn't help but wonder if I had crossed a line I couldn't come back from. Was I becoming the very thing I feared? A part of me was scared of what I was about to do. But the other part, the part that had been pushed to the edge by betrayal, was ready for whatever came next. The game had changed, and I was determined to win. The air in the room felt thick, charged with anticipation as I sat there, my mind racing. I had set my plan in motion, and now I was waiting for the first domino to fall. James Carson's name was a key to understanding just how deep the hole really went, and I knew that getting to him was the only way to put an end to this madness. But as I began to execute my plan, something unexpected happened. I wasn't the only one playing the game anymore. The first move had been simple enough. I made contact with one of Tom's old associates, a man named Victor who I knew had ties to the people who were after him. I was careful with my approach, knowing that one wrong move could expose everything. I pretended to be desperate enough to believe that I could still save Tom, to believe that the mess could still be undone. Victor had been hesitant at first, but I'd offered him a deal, an offer he couldn't refuse. He agreed to meet in person. The location was set, an old, abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. It was a place where deals were made and broken, where the air smelled of dust and betrayal. I arrived there early, waiting, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was where it all changed. I had the upper hand, and I wasn't going to waste it. As the minutes passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I tried to push it aside. After all, I had a plan, and I had no intention of letting fear stop me. But as I watched Victor approach, my gut clenched. He wasn't alone. There were two others with him, men I didn't recognize, but who carried themselves with an air of authority and menace. The situation had shifted without me even realizing it. This wasn't just about saving Tom anymore. This was about survival. Victor's eyes flickered to the men behind him, then back to me. "You should have stayed out of this," he said, his voice low, almost regretful. "It's too late for you to get involved." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected Victor to know. But before I could process his words, the door to the warehouse creaked open, and in walked someone I never thought I'd see again. Tom. He was looking disheveled, his clothes torn, his face gaunt. There was no mistaking the terror in his eyes. He was not the man I had once loved, not the man I had trusted. This was a man who had lost control of everything. He stumbled into the room, his eyes meeting mine with a mixture of guilt and something else. Something darker. "You shouldn't have come here," he muttered, his voice shaking. "They've been following me. I didn't know how to stop it. I couldn't tell you, but I didn't think you'd get caught up in all of this." The words hung in the air like a thick fog. What was he saying? Why had he never warned me? Why hadn't he trusted me with the truth? I could feel my anger rising, my pulse quickening. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. The situation had escalated, and there was no turning back now. Before I could respond, one of the men behind Victor stepped forward, his eyes locked on mine. "You don't get to ask questions," he said, his tone cold. "We have a deal with your husband, and now you're part of it." I stepped back, trying to regain control of the situation. "What deal? What are you talking about?" "I don't know anything about this," I said, my voice trembling. The man smirked. "Oh, you're more involved than you think. You see, your husband's debts weren't just money, he owed more than just cash. He owed favors that now extend to you. You're in this now, whether you like it or not." The world seemed to spin around me. I had known there was more to this than I could see, but I never imagined it would go this far. Tom had been playing a dangerous game, and now it seemed like everyone involved was paying the price. My mind raced. This wasn't just about a few bad choices anymore. This was a full-blown mess, a life-or-death situation that I had no control over. Victor stepped forward, his gaze sharp. "You should have stayed out of it, but now you're in too deep. We'll make sure you understand that." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. My daughter. The way she had acted. The way she had taken charge, handling things that I couldn't even begin to understand. Lily hadn't just been fixing Tom's mistakes. She had been setting up her own plan, preparing us for what was coming. I hadn't been the one calling the shots. Lily had been. I turned to her in disbelief, my heart sinking. Lily had been planning everything. She had been orchestrating all of this behind my back, pulling strings, making deals. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But then, just as the situation seemed to spiral completely out of control, Lily walked into the warehouse, her small figure cutting through the tension like a knife. She wasn't scared. She wasn't shaking. In fact, she looked calm, too calm for a 10-year-old who should have been terrified by the scene before her. "Enough," she said, her voice steady. The room went silent as everyone turned to face her. She was holding something in her hand, something that shimmered in the dim light. It was a piece of paper folded neatly. She walked towards Victor and handed it to him. "This changes everything," Lily said softly. Victor took the paper from her, his expression unreadable. He unfolded it slowly, and as he read the words on the page, his face went pale. The silence was deafening. Then, in an instant, everything exploded. Victor crumpled the paper in his hands and threw it to the ground, his eyes widening in shock. How could you have gotten this?" Lily didn't answer. Instead, she turned to face me, a hint of pride in her eyes. "I told you, Mom. I fixed it." In that moment, everything made sense. Lily had been the one who had outsmarted them all. She had played them, manipulated them, and had been in control of the situation from the very beginning. The twists, the turns, the betrayal, it was all part of her plan. The vengeance was hers to claim. The room fell into chaos as Victor and his men scrambled, trying to understand what had just happened. They had been outwitted by a child. And in that moment I knew Lily had done what I couldn't. She had saved us all. And as the dust settled, I realized that the game wasn't over. It had only just begun. As the last echo of chaos died down in the warehouse, I stood there, unable to process the sudden shift in power. The room, once filled with threats and tension, now felt oddly still. Victor and his men, defeated and stunned, had no words left. They couldn't comprehend how they had been outsmarted, how everything they had believed they controlled had slipped right through their fingers. But none of this mattered to me. The only thing that mattered was Lily. She had done it. My little girl, who I had once believed was too innocent to understand the world's darkest corners, had orchestrated everything. From the moment she had whispered that she had fixed it, I knew I had been living in the shadows of something far bigger than I could comprehend. And now, as the dust settled, I understood the depths of her brilliance. "Lily," I finally breathed, my voice shaking. How did you know?" Her small frame, barely coming up to my waist, stood tall in the midst of the wreckage her plan had caused. She turned to face me, a calm smile playing at the edges of her lips, one that I had never seen before, so much more mature than the one I had known. "I knew, Mom. I had to know. You were too focused on saving Dad, and I couldn't let anything happen to you." Her words stung me in a way I didn't expect. She had seen my weakness, my hesitation, my inability to act fast enough. And in her childlike wisdom, she had taken control. She had seen the pieces I couldn't see, and now, all of a sudden, I was the one left playing catch-up. Before I could process everything she had just said, the phone in my pocket buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, and the pit in my stomach tightened as I answered it. "Hello," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, still reeling from the events unfolding in front of me. "Is everything taken care of?" It was a calm, measured voice, one that didn't belong to anyone I had met so far. It was the same voice that had spoken to me on the phone days ago, the one that had hinted at dangers beyond what I could understand. "It is," I replied cautiously, my mind racing as the implications of this conversation started to sink in. "Good," the voice responded. "Because now it's time to collect. Your debt is paid, but there's still work to be done. You can't just walk away from this, you know." I felt the blood drain from my face as I looked at Lily. What debt? What work? What had she gotten us into? I wanted to scream at the voice on the phone to demand answers, but all I could do was listen. My daughter had set everything in motion, but now there was no turning back. "You don't control me," I finally spat, shaking with the intensity of it all. "This ends now." The voice on the other end of the line chuckled softly, as if it knew something I didn't. "It doesn't work that way. Not anymore." With that, the line went dead, leaving me in a cold, deafening silence. My hands trembled as I slowly lowered the phone, my heart pounding. I turned to Lily, searching her face for some sign of reassurance, but all I saw was a quiet certainty in her eyes, one that sent a shiver down my spine. "Mom, it's not over. It's never been over." She said the words so matter-of-factly that I almost didn't believe them at first. But then the full weight of what she had done, and what I had allowed her to do, began to dawn on me. I had trusted her, yes, but I had also unknowingly placed my faith in forces I couldn't control. Forces that now held both my husband's fate and mine in their hands. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival. I moved toward the door of the warehouse, unsure of what I was going to do next. The plan had worked, yes. The immediate danger was over. But now I had to face the aftermath. The people behind this, Victor, Carson, the ones pulling the strings in the shadows, would not let us go without a price. I had no doubt they would come back for what they believed was owed to them. As we stepped outside into the cold night air, the weight of what had happened slowly began to sink in. Lily had helped us navigate the storm, but in doing so she had led us into even deeper waters. The world I thought I knew was now unrecognizable, and I was left with more questions than answers. I looked down at Lily, whose face was unreadable now, as if she had closed off a part of herself that I could never reach. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice thick with uncertainty. "We keep moving forward, Mom," she said, her voice calm. "This is just the beginning." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that she was too young, that she couldn't possibly understand the ramifications of what we were facing. But the truth was, she did understand. She had always understood more than I gave her credit for. She had played the game better than anyone, and now it seemed she was prepared to face whatever came next. And that terrified me. Days passed, and the aftermath of the warehouse confrontation settled into an uneasy peace. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the moment when we would be thrust back into the chaos that had consumed us. But it never came, at least not in the way I expected. The threat was still out there, lingering like a dark cloud waiting to burst, but for now we were safe. I took a long, hard look at my life, at the choices I had made, and at the daughter who had proven herself capable of far more than I could ever have imagined. She wasn't just the innocent little girl I thought she was. She was something more, something capable of great things and terrible things, all in the name of survival. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a message, simple and to the point. "You're not done yet. There's always more to this game. Be ready." I looked at Lily, who was now standing beside me, her gaze unwavering. I had no idea what was coming next, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never be the same again. Neither of us would be. We had crossed a line, and we had no choice but to follow wherever it led. But deep down I realized something. Whatever happened next, we would face it together. And in that moment, I knew we were stronger than anything the world could throw at us. I got laid off, and my husband swore to support me, then drained our joint account, sneering, "You're a burden now." Too bad he doesn't know I transferred half to a secret account years ago. Now, with his mistress gone and his credit destroyed, guess who's crawling back? "Who's the burden now, sweetheart?" "You're a burden now." The words sliced through the kitchen air, sharp as the knife I'd been chopping onions with. Lucas stood across from me, his hand hovering over his phone where the banking app displayed our account balance. $12.47. Just minutes before, it had shown $27,865.32. Our safety net, our future, our 15 years of shared dreams, now vanished with a few taps of his finger. "What have you done?" My voice didn't sound like my own. It was too calm, too hollow. The knife trembled in my hand. "What I should have done the moment you told me you got laid off." His voice had changed too, no longer the warm timber I'd fallen for all those years ago. "I've been carrying you for too long, Heather. It's time you learned to stand on your own. If you've ever had to rebuild after someone shattered your trust, this story might strike a chord. Consider subscribing. It's completely free and connects you with others who understand that sometimes our greatest strength emerges when someone calls us a burden. Let's continue Heather's journey together." 15 years flashed before my eyes. 15 years of stepping back, of saying Lucas goes first, of quiet sacrifices that had led to this moment. 15 years of being the supportive wife, the understanding partner, the eternal cheerleader. 15 years of slowly becoming invisible. I set down the knife with deliberate care. "I see." Two simple words that masked the storm brewing inside me. Lucas didn't know about my grandmother's inheritance, or the account I'd been quietly building for years. He didn't know that this betrayal had just set something in motion he couldn't stop. But he would learn. And I would be the teacher. My career in marketing had begun with so much promise. Fresh out of college with honors, I'd landed a coveted position at Meridian Marketing, one of the fastest-growing agencies in our region. Within 2 years, I'd secured 3 major clients and had been singled out by the creative director as one to watch. My portfolio was growing and industry peers were beginning to recognize my name. That was when I met Lucas at a networking event. Tall, confident, with plans to revolutionize local construction management. His passion was magnetic, his ambition contagious. We fell into a whirlwind romance that felt like destiny. "We're going to build something amazing together," he'd promised on our 3rd date, tracing plans for his future company on a coffee shop napkin. "I can feel it." I believed him. Of course I did. His dreams seemed so tangible, so certain. Our connection felt rare and precious. We both understood the drive to succeed, the thrill of creative problem-solving, the satisfaction of making a mark. In those early days we supported each other equally. I helped him craft his business proposals while he encouraged my creative campaigns. We were partners in the truest sense, celebrating each other's victories, commiserating over setbacks, planning a future where both our stars would rise. Our wedding was small but perfect. To equal partners, Lucas had toasted, raising his glass to mine. To building our empire together. I didn't realize then that empires typically have only one ruler. The pivotal moment came 3 years into our marriage. My boss called me into her office on a Tuesday afternoon, her face alight with excitement. "The Seattle office wants you, Heather. Creative director position. It's a huge step up. More money, more responsibility, the chance to build your own team. They've been watching your work for months." My heart soared. This was everything I'd been working toward. That evening, I rushed home to share the news with Lucas, bursting through our apartment door with champagne. But Lucas wasn't celebrating. He sat at our kitchen table, shoulders slumped, holding a letter that changed everything. "Morgan Brothers rejected my business loan," he said, not looking up. "3rd rejection this month." I set down the champagne and moved to his side. "I'm so sorry, Lucas. But you'll find another way. You always do." "There's a smaller opportunity," he said after a moment. "Construction management position with Davidson Builders. Not what I wanted, but it could be a foot in the door. The problem is..." He finally met my eyes. "It's here. Not Seattle." The silence that followed contained the weight of unspoken expectations. We both knew what was happening. This was a test. Our dreams in direct competition. Someone had to bend. "Seattle can wait," I heard myself say. "Your career needs this chance right now." The relief and gratitude on his face convinced me I'd made the right choice. It was temporary, I told myself. My turn would come. I rejected the Seattle offer the next day. My boss couldn't hide her disappointment. "Are you sure about this, Heather? Opportunities like this don't come around often." "I'm sure," I said with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "Family comes first." The gradual shift in our relationship was so subtle I barely noticed it happening. Lucas thrived at Davidson Builders, quickly becoming indispensable. His salary grew. His confidence expanded. His network widened. Meanwhile, I took a lateral position at a smaller local agency. Good work, but not the trajectory I'd been on. "It's just for now," became my silent mantra during late nights when I helped Lucas prepare presentations for his bosses. I researched industry trends for him, edited his reports, and listened to his practice pitches. His success became our success. His dreams became our dreams. Mine quietly faded into the background. When Emma arrived 3 years later, my career compromises seemed justified. Our daughter needed stability, and Lucas's rising position provided that. I shifted to part-time work for 2 years, then returned to a mid-level marketing position that offered flexibility but limited growth. "You're so lucky you don't have the pressure I do," Lucas would say, loosening his tie after dinner. "Just a simple job, home by 5, no major responsibilities." Each comment was a tiny cut. My simple job still brought in 1/3 of our household income. My lack of pressure included managing our entire domestic life while maintaining a professional presence. My no major responsibilities somehow encompassed everything from Emma's education to our social calendar to Lucas's dry cleaning. But I smiled and nodded. "You work so hard, honey. We appreciate it. The warning signs were there had I chosen to see them. Lucas began referring to my paycheck as spending money rather than our shared income. He started making financial decisions without consultation, explaining afterward with a patronizing, "I didn't want to bother you with the details." When colleagues asked about my work at social functions, he would answer before I could, minimizing my role. "Heather keeps the lights on at some local businesses," he'd say with a laugh. "Nothing like what we're doing at Davidson, but it keeps her busy." Out of loyalty, or perhaps fear, I interpreted these moments as stress, as thoughtlessness, as anything but what they truly were: evidence of fundamental disrespect. The day before my layoff, Lucas came home with news of his biggest promotion yet. Regional Director of Operations. "We did it, babe," he said, lifting me off my feet in a rare display of shared triumph. All those sacrifices were worth it. I should have asked, "Which sacrifices, Lucas? Yours or mine?" Instead, I ordered takeout and poured the wine. 24 hours later, I would become a burden in his eyes. And everything would change. The morning of my layoff began like any other Tuesday. Emma had soccer practice after school. Lucas needed his blue tie for a client meeting, and I had a 10 a.m. presentation on the Westbrook campaign. Ordinary concerns for an ordinary day, until my desk phone rang at 9:17. "Heather, can you come to conference room B?" Marissa from HR never called my direct line. Something in her artificially cheerful tone sent a chill through me. Conference room B held 4 people. Marissa, my direct supervisor Tom, the agency owner Gerald, and a woman I didn't recognize with a leather portfolio. Their expressions told me everything before a word was spoken. "Please sit down, Heather." Gerald gestured to the lone chair across from them. A firing squad arrangement. Tom couldn't meet my eyes as Gerald explained the restructuring and unfortunate market conditions. My position was being eliminated, effective immediately. 15 years of dedication reduced to a manila envelope containing severance details and COBRA information. "Your contributions have been valuable," Marissa recited, clearly reading from a mental script. "But we need to consolidate the creative department." "I understand," I heard myself say, though I didn't. "Not really." The stranger with the portfolio, apparently from an outplacement service, handed me her card. I tucked it away mechanically, knowing I'd never call. "We'll need your key card and company phone," Tom finally spoke, his voice barely audible. Within 30 minutes, I was standing in the parking lot with a small box of personal items. A family photo, my favorite coffee mug, a desk plant Emma had given me for Mother's Day 3 years ago. 15 years distilled into a container I could carry with one hand. Sitting in my car, I called Lucas. Straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's me. Something's happened at work. Call me when you can." I kept my voice steady, professional. No need to panic him during his workday. Strangely, driving home, I felt a flutter of something like hope. Perhaps this was an opportunity, not a setback. Lucas had just received his promotion. We had financial breathing room. Maybe now I could pursue something more aligned with my original ambitions. Start fresh. Maybe even launch my own small agency. By afternoon, I'd updated my resume and researched 3 marketing positions. I made a special dinner, Lucas's favorite lasagna, and helped Emma with her biology homework while waiting for him to arrive. When his key turned in the lock at 7:32 p.m., I had a glass of wine ready for him. "You're home early," he observed, loosening his tie. "What happened?" "Shoreview is downsizing," I said, holding out the wine. My position was eliminated. Lucas didn't take the glass. His expression shifted from surprise to something harder to identify. Not sympathy. Not concern. A calculation. "What about severance?" His first question caught me off guard. 3 months, plus accumulated vacation. I set the wine down. "It's not ideal timing, but with your promotion." "Not ideal timing?" He cut me off with a harsh laugh. "That's putting it mildly." The ensuing argument escalated quickly, with Lucas pacing our kitchen like a caged animal. His reaction bewildered me. We'd weathered challenges before. We had savings. This wasn't catastrophic. "I can't believe your selfishness," he finally snapped, grabbing his keys. "I need some air." He didn't return until after midnight. I pretended to be asleep when he came to bed, but sleep eluded me as questions multiplied in my mind. The next morning brought no resolution. Lucas was distant over breakfast, speaking only to Emma about her upcoming science fair. I spent the day sending out applications determined to show initiative. When Lucas returned from work, I approached him with a structured plan for our finances during my job search. I've calculated our expenses, I began, spreading a spreadsheet on the kitchen counter. With my severance and our savings, we can maintain everything comfortably for at least 6 months, even if... I need to check something, he interrupted, pulling out his phone. The color drained from his face as he stared at the screen. Then came the accusation that would reveal everything. You've been moving money out of our account? What? No, I haven't touched anything. I moved beside him to look at his phone. Our joint account balance showed $12.47. Where is it? I asked, confusion giving way to alarm. Where's our money? Safe, he answered coldly. Where you can't access it. The truth crystallized in that moment. Lucas had emptied our account, our shared savings built over 15 years of marriage. You had no right, I began. I had every right, he cut me off. I earned most of it. We both contributed. That account is in both our names. My voice rose despite Emma being upstairs. You're a burden now. The words fell like stones between us. I'm not carrying dead weight. The kitchen knife I'd been using to chop onions trembled in my hand. I set it down carefully, afraid of what I might say or do next. What about Emma's college fund? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Don't touch it, he warned. That stays where it is. He left again that night. I sat at our kitchen table until dawn, numb with betrayal and something else. A cold, clarifying anger. Morning found me at his desk in our home office, searching for answers. Emma had gone to school and Lucas to work. The house echoed with absence as I methodically went through his files, his browser history, his statements. The credit card bill revealed a pattern. Dinners at places we'd never been together, a hotel charge from 2 months ago, a jewelry purchase from a boutique that had never gifted anything to me. Small inconsistencies that painted a damning picture. Text messages appeared on his iPad, synced from his phone. A woman named Megan sending hearts, scheduling meetings that never appeared on his work calendar, complaining that he hadn't left me yet. My hands were steady as I photographed everything. Each image was a brick in the foundation of whatever would come next. That evening, I told Emma that her father was on a business trip. She accepted the explanation without question, accustomed to his absences. We ordered pizza and watched her favorite movie. I braided her hair before bed, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, memorizing the moment. Is everything okay, Mom? She asked, eyes wiser than her 14 years. Everything will be, I promised, meaning it for the first time. After she fell asleep, I made 3 phone calls. To my grandmother's lawyer, to my best friend Kate, who had always disliked Lucas, and to my cousin Thomas, who sat on the board of the local contractors association. Alone in the master bedroom, I removed my wedding ring and placed it on Lucas's pillow. Then I pulled up the banking app on my phone and checked my private account, the one Lucas knew nothing about. The balance displayed $142,856.79. Who's the burden now? I whispered to the empty room, allowing myself a single sharp smile before beginning to plan my resurrection. Sleep came in fitful bursts that night as memories of my grandmother rose flooded back. Memories I hadn't revisited in years. I could almost smell her lavender sachets and hear the creak of her rocking chair as I recalled the day she changed my life, 5 years into my marriage with Lucas. Heather, darling, she'd said during one of our Sunday visits, come help me in the garden. At 78, Rose Blackwood was still tending her vegetables and dispensing wisdom in equal measure. As we knelt in the soil, she handed me an envelope. This is the deed to this house and property, she said without preamble. I'm putting it in your name. Today. Grandma, I can't. You can and you will, she cut me off, her hands still nimble as they tucked a tomato plant into the earth. And you'll tell no one. Not your mother, not your cousins, and especially not Lucas. Her directness shocked me. Why not Lucas? Rose sat back on her heels, fixing me with the clear-eyed gaze that had intimidated generations of Blackwoods. Because a woman should always have something that's hers alone. My Harold was a good man, better than most, but even he didn't know about my safe deposit box. I'd laughed then, thinking she was exaggerating. She wasn't. I've watched you dim your light for that man, she continued. Maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't. But you'll have this as insurance either way. The property wasn't large or particularly valuable then. A modest 3-bedroom house on the edge of town with an acre of land. But Rose had chosen well decades ago. The town had grown around it and developers had been eyeing the location for years. When she passed 6 months later, I honored her wishes. The property remained in my name only, separate from all our marital assets. Lucas assumed it had gone to my mother or been sold. I never corrected him. That same month, I opened a separate account at a credit union across town. Each payday I transferred a small amount, $50 here, $100 there. Nothing Lucas would notice in our comfortable financial situation. On the rare occasions he questioned a discrepancy, I mentioned Target purchases or coffee dates with friends. He never looked too closely at women's expenses. The rental income from Rose's property went directly into that account. First from a young couple, then from a nurse who stayed 5 years. The money accumulated slowly but steadily, my quiet rebellion, my secret strength. Now, in the darkness of what had been our bedroom, I thanked Rose for her foresight. The woman who had survived the depression, raised 4 children alone after her husband's early death, and never remarried, had known something about self-preservation that I was only now fully appreciating. Morning arrived with a text from Lucas, coming by at noon to collect some things. I went straight to check Emma's college fund. Lucas and I had established a 529 plan when she was born, with both of us contributing monthly. Accessing the account online, I discovered 3 attempted withdrawals in the past week. All rejected because they required dual authorization. My phone showed no notifications about these attempts. Lucas had been trying to drain this account too without alerting me. My hands shook with a combination of rage and vindication. This wasn't just about punishing me for losing my job. He was systematically trying to strip away our daughter's future. I picked up the phone and called the investment firm, explaining the situation. The representative was sympathetic but clear. Without evidence of financial malfeasance, they couldn't remove Lucas from the account. "We need documentation of financial abuse or a court order," she explained. "I understand," I replied, my mind already racing ahead to next steps. "Please flag the account for heightened security in the meantime." Next, I called my cousin Thomas. Our families had drifted apart over the years, another casualty of Lucas's careful social engineering. But Thomas had always made a point of sending Emma birthday cards and Christmas gifts. "Heather, this is unexpected," he answered, genuine warmth in his voice. "I need your help, Tom," I said, surprising myself with my directness. "It's about Lucas." The silence on the line stretched for a moment before he responded. Finally. That single word confirmed what I'd suspected. Others had seen what I'd been blind to for years. Thomas served on the board of the local Contractors Association, the organization that had helped Lucas build his network and reputation in the industry. As we talked, I learned that Lucas's charming facade had begun to show cracks in professional circles as well. Small promises unfulfilled, credit taken for others' work, questionable billing practices with suppliers. "Nothing big enough to cause real trouble," Thomas explained, "but enough to raise eyebrows." "I need to understand who he's really been all these years," I said, "including his relationship with his assistant." Thomas's hesitation told me everything. "Megan Daniels," he finally confirmed. "It's been going on about 8 months from what I've heard. She's been at industry events, introduced as a colleague. Most people know the truth." The confirmation should have hurt more, but instead it was like lancing a boil. Painful but ultimately relieving. "I need names," I said. "Everyone he does business with, everyone who might have seen things I haven't." "Heather," concern colored Thomas's voice, "what are you planning?" "Nothing illegal," I assured him. Just finally opening my eyes. By noon I had a list of contacts and a clear picture of Lucas's professional web. I also had Megan's full name, address and social media profiles, all revealing a woman 10 years younger who posted inspirational quotes about deserving better and waiting for someone to choose you. The irony wasn't lost on me. When Lucas arrived to collect his things, I was calm and composed in a way that clearly unsettled him. "Emma will be home at 4, I said. "I'd prefer you be gone by then." He bristled at my tone. "I have a right to see my daughter." "Of course you do. We can set up a schedule once you have a stable living situation." I handed him a printed statement of the 529 account showing the attempted withdrawals. And once you explain why you tried to steal her college fund. The color drained from his face. That's not. Save it for the mediator. I cut him off. Your things are packed in the guest room. As he stomped upstairs, my phone pinged with an email from a developer who'd been interested in Grandmother Rose's property for years. They'd increased their offer significantly since we last spoke. Sometimes the universe has impeccable timing. When Lucas returned downstairs with 2 suitcases, I was sitting calmly at the kitchen table typing an email response. Where am I supposed to go? He demanded, his earlier confidence replaced by petulance. I looked up with genuine curiosity. Isn't that Megan's department now? The shock on his face confirmed what I'd suspected. He hadn't planned for this outcome at all. He'd expected me to beg, to break, to bargain. Instead, he was encountering a version of me he didn't recognize. A woman with hidden reserves of strength he'd never bothered to see. The day after Lucas moved out, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, opened my laptop and typed, Blackwood Marketing Solutions. Simple. Professional. Within a week, I had secured a modest loan using Grandmother Rose's property as collateral. I rented a small office space downtown, deliberately choosing a building visible from Lucas's office window. The sign installer positioned my new company logo, a sleek, modern design in black and silver, so it would catch the afternoon light. A petty gesture perhaps, but satisfying nonetheless. My first target wasn't Lucas directly but rather the ecosystem he depended on. Davidson Builders worked with 3 primary architectural firms, all of which needed marketing services. I knew this because I'd listened to Lucas talk shop for 15 years, absorbing information he assumed went in one ear and out the other. Jenny Hargrove, principal at Hargrove Designs, had always been cool toward Lucas. During our few social interactions, I'd noticed her subtle eye rolls at his more bombastic statements. She became my first client. Your husband's been trying to undercut my bids for years, Jenny confided during our initial meeting. Nothing I could prove, but I know it was happening. Ex-husband, I corrected. And I'm not surprised. But that's not why I'm here. I presented a comprehensive marketing strategy for her firm, one that highlighted their sustainable building practices, something Lucas had always dismissed as tree hugger nonsense. Jenny signed the contract that day. Word travels fast in small professional communities. Within 3 weeks, I had secured 2 more architecture clients, both competitors to firms Lucas courted. My knowledge of construction industry jargon and needs, gleaned from years of listening and editing Lucas's presentations, proved invaluable. The first chance encounter occurred at the Greenery, an upscale restaurant where Lucas often took clients. I was having lunch with Jenny when Lucas walked in with the board chairman of Southwest Development. His double take upon seeing us together was subtle but unmistakable. Lucas, I nodded politely as they passed our table. How lovely to see you. Jenny and I were just discussing her new project on Riverside Drive. Brilliant concept. Riverside Drive had been a development Lucas had been pursuing for months. The flash of alarm in his eyes was brief but telling. Heather, he managed, his smile strained. I wasn't aware you 2 knew each other. Oh, we're working together now, Jenny replied cheerfully. Your ex has quite the marketing mind. She's revolutionizing how we position ourselves in the market. The chairman's interest was immediately piqued. You're in marketing, Mrs. Carter? Blackwood, I corrected smoothly. Heather Blackwood. And yes, my firm specializes in architecture and construction marketing. Here's my card if you'd ever like to discuss your needs. Lucas's jaw tightened as I handed his potential client my business card. The private text he sent me 30 minutes later was less controlled. What the hell do you think you're doing? I didn't reply. Strategic silence can speak volumes. Similar coincidences occurred over the next month. Me appearing at industry events I'd previously avoided, connecting with people Lucas needed, offering insights that showcased my understanding of the market. I never spoke ill of him. I didn't need to. His reputation was beginning to speak for itself. Meanwhile, Lucas's financial situation was deteriorating. Thomas kept me informed of the industry gossip. Lucas had taken out a high-interest loan, missed payments to suppliers, and was rumored to be borrowing from business accounts to maintain his personal lifestyle. The credit card statements I still received showed a pattern of desperation. Expensive restaurants, jewelry store purchases, weekend getaways to impress Megan. He was spending as if nothing had changed, despite losing half his household income and access to our joint savings. "He's bought her a watch worth 2 mortgage payments," Emma remarked one evening, scrolling through her phone. At my questioning look, she explained, "Megan posted it on Instagram. Thanks to my amazing man for this incredible surprise." Emma's eye roll was pure teenage judgment. "Real subtle, Dad." I'd been careful to shield Emma from the uglier aspects of our separation, but at 14 she was observant enough to piece things together. When she'd asked about the reasons for our split, I'd been honest about the financial betrayal but avoided mentioning the affair. "He took our savings without talking to me first," I'd explained. "Marriage needs trust and that broke mine." Emma had nodded thoughtfully. "Is that why he tries to buy me expensive stuff every weekend?" Her perception startled me. "He's trying to show he still has money, right? Like to prove something." "What do you think?" I'd asked, curious about her insight. "I think he's scared," she'd said simply. "And probably in trouble." He was right. Lucas's desperate spending was a house of cards that couldn't stand much longer. The collapse began at the Davidson Builders Autumn Client Appreciation event, a gathering I would have normally attended as Lucas's supportive wife, now an event I deliberately attended as a professional in my own right, invited by one of my architectural clients. Lucas was holding court near the bar, Megan at his side in a dress that cost more than most people's monthly car payments, when his credit card was declined. I witnessed it from across the room, the embarrassed fumbling for another card, Megan's confused expression, the whispered argument that followed. By the time I circulated to their side of the room, Megan was nowhere to be seen. Lucas stood alone, nursing a drink, his typical confident posture notably absent. "Everything all right?" I asked, genuine curiosity in my voice. "Perfect," he replied, the edge in his tone betraying the lie. "Why wouldn't it be?" "Just checking. Emma mentioned you might be coming to her science fair tomorrow." His face fell. "I can't make it. Something came up with the Westbrook project." "That's strange," I replied. "I had lunch with Philip Westbrook yesterday. He mentioned the project is on hold until spring." The realization that I now had direct relationships with his clients visibly shook him. He excused himself quickly, leaving his half-finished drink behind. 2 days later, Emma forwarded me a screenshot of Megan's latest social media post, a vague but pointed rant about men who promise the world but can't even afford the rent, and starting over with self-respect intact. The relationship had apparently imploded once the financial reality became clear. The community's perception shifted gradually but inexorably. Lucas had always cultivated an image of success and stability. The reliable family man, the prudent businessman, the generous community member. As his financial struggles became more evident, that carefully constructed facade began to crumble. His absences from community events were noticed. His excuses about missed payments were questioned. His seats on local boards, positions he'd leveraged for business connections, were quietly filled by others when his terms expired. I never had to say a word against him. The consequences of his own actions spoke eloquently enough. "Mom," Emma asked one evening as we prepared dinner together, "do you think Dad ever really loved us or just the idea of having a family to show off?" The question pierced my heart with its raw insight. "I think he loved us in the way he knows how to love," I answered carefully. "Some people can only see others in terms of what they provide." Emma nodded, wise beyond her years. "I'm glad you're not like that." In that moment, watching my daughter's strong profile as she chopped vegetables, I realized that the subtle art of consequences had yielded an unexpected blessing. Clarity not just for me but for her as well. 3 months after our separation, Blackwood Marketing Solutions had grown from a one-woman operation to a small team of 4. I'd hired a talented graphic designer fresh out of college, a social media expert with industry connections, and a part-time office manager who happened to be a former Davidson Builders employee with an encyclopedic knowledge of their operations. We'd outgrown the original office and moved to a larger space in the same building, this time with a corner view and windows on 2 sides. Meanwhile, Lucas's financial house of cards was collapsing spectacularly. Thomas called one Tuesday morning, his voice unnaturally tight. "You might want to sit down for this," he began. Lucas tried to secure funding for a speculative development project on the north side. Used falsified documents showing Davidson's support. My stomach tightened. How bad? Bad enough that Davidson has placed him on administrative leave pending investigation. Rumor has it he's leveraged everything trying to get this project off the ground. Mortgaged his condo, taken personal loans, even approached some questionable private lenders. Why would he risk everything on this project? I asked, genuinely bewildered. Thomas hesitated. Word is he was trying to create a financial comeback after Megan left. She'd been talking about their future. Marriage, a bigger house, and when she walked out, something snapped. This project was supposed to be his grand redemption. That evening, I received an unexpected credit alert. Lucas had attempted to open a new credit card using our old joint information, including my social security number. The attempt was flagged and denied due to the fraud alert I'd placed on my credit after our separation. His desperation was reaching dangerous levels. Emma noticed the change in her father too. Their weekend visits had become irregular, with Lucas often canceling at the last minute or cutting them short with vague excuses about work emergencies. "He took me to lunch at Burger King yesterday," she remarked one Sunday evening. "Said his credit card was acting weird, so we had to go somewhere cheap." She picked at a thread on her sleeve. "It's weird seeing him like this. He used to act like he owned the world." "People often show their true selves under pressure," I replied carefully. "He asked me about you," she continued. "Like, a lot of questions about the business and if we're doing okay financially." Her eyes met mine, suddenly sharp. I didn't tell him anything. I hugged her, overcome with pride at her instinctive loyalty and wisdom. "Thank you, sweetheart." "He's not the person I thought he was," she said into my shoulder. "I used to think he was so strong and successful. Now I just feel sorry for him." The final collapse came swiftly. Lucas's name appeared in the business section of the local paper, not in the flattering profiles he'd once cultivated, but in a small article detailing financial improprieties at Davidson Builders. Though the piece didn't explicitly state he'd been fired, the wording made it clear his departure had been involuntary and under investigation. 2 days later, my office phone rang. The receptionist's voice was unusually hesitant. "Mrs. Blackwood? Lucas Carter is in the lobby asking to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." My heart performed a curious little flip, not from lingering affection but from the unexpected arrival of a moment I'd somehow known would come. "Tell him I'll be down in 5 minutes." I took my time, finishing an email to a client, touching up my lipstick and straightening my desk. When I finally descended to the lobby, Lucas was pacing by the windows, his appearance notably different from his usual polished self. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and the confident posture that had once defined him was nowhere to be seen. "Let's walk," I suggested, gesturing toward the small park across the street. Public places were safer for difficult conversations. We settled on a bench overlooking a children's playground. Lucas sat heavily beside me, the space between us charged with unspoken history. "I need your help," he finally said, the words appearing to physically pain him. "What kind of help?" I kept my voice neutral, professional. "Financial." He couldn't meet my eyes. "Temporary. Just until I get back on my feet." "I see." I watched a young mother pushing a laughing toddler on a swing. "And why would I do that?" "Because we were married for 15 years, he replied, a hint of the old entitlement creeping into his tone. "Because we have a daughter together. Because it's the right thing to do." I allowed the words to hang in the air between us, considering each one carefully before responding. "Do you remember what you said to me the day after I lost my job?" I asked finally. "When you drained our account and left me with nothing?" His gaze dropped to his hands. "Heather, I was under a lot of pressure. You called me a burden," I continued calmly. "You said you wouldn't carry dead weight." "I didn't mean." "No, I think you did mean it." I turned to face him fully. "You meant every word. You'd been thinking it for years, that I was somehow less valuable, less worthy of respect because I'd stepped back from my career to support yours. That my contribution to our family was somehow insignificant next to yours." He didn't deny it, which was perhaps the most honest he'd been in years. "I'm not going to help you, Lucas," I said quietly. Not financially, not professionally, not in any way that enables you to avoid the consequences of your choices. Then why did you agree to see me? Frustration etched his voice. I smiled then, feeling a curious lightness. Closure, perhaps. Or maybe just to see your face when you realized how completely the tables have turned. I stood, smoothing my skirt. Who's the burden now, sweetheart? The words weren't delivered with venom or triumph, just simple, undeniable truth. His face registered the hit, the echo of his own cruel dismissal coming back to him when he was at his lowest. What am I supposed to do? He asked, genuine fear cracking through his facade. The same thing you expected me to do, I replied. Start over. Learn to stand on your own. As I walked away, I felt no vindictive pleasure, only a profound sense of having come full circle. The woman who had once dimmed her light for a man's comfort was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own worth and power. That evening, Emma and I sat on our back porch watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. I'd told her about Lucas's visit, believing in honesty as the foundation of trust. Are you okay? She asked, her young face serious in the fading light. I am, I realized, the truth of it settling deep in my bones. Better than I've been in a long time. Will Dad be okay? Her question held concern but not the desperate worry of months before. Eventually, I said. When he learns that his value doesn't depend on appearances or possessions. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I hope he figures it out. Me too, I said and meant it. The phone rang inside. Another potential client referred by Jenny Hargrove. As I rose to answer it, I caught my reflection in the window glass. The woman looking back at me stood straight and tall, unburdened at last by the weight of diminished expectations. No longer supporting someone else's dreams at the expense of my own. No longer a burden but a force to be reckoned with.